Now, the well-ordered soul, you would say the soul in original justice, the way things are supposed to be, takes those biological and psychological inputs, and when it processes them, it decides to act or not act upon them based upon love. Okay, so the input comes in, and it chooses based upon love. So there's an input to eat. However, we need to eat to stay alive. And so it looks at the food, and it says, I'm hungry. I need to stay alive. I need to have energy to serve others, so therefore I choose to eat. Or it may also look at the food in a state of poverty and say, I'm hungry, and I need to eat, but I'm not going to eat so I can save that food for my children. Or as we sometimes saw so nobly in the concentration camps, I'm going to share my food with those who are even more hungry than I. So you see how for love we choose how to act upon these biological or psychological inputs. We may have a biological input to reproduce. And so we're together with our wife and we say, yeah, I really do want to create new life. I want to have children. I want to share my life and my goods with others. And we choose to do this. On the other hand, we might say, oh, I feel this biological input to reproduce, but my wife really does have a headache, or she's tired, and she's been keeping house all day, or out working all day, or whatever. And, sometimes making love is rolling over and going to sleep. So you see how we process in the well-ordered soul those biological inputs for love. The weakened soul, the wounded soul, receives the same neutral biological or psychological inputs, but it either chooses to act or not act upon them for self, or because they are just overwhelmed in weakness by the biological or psychological input. So again, we have this food which is set out before us, and we say, I'm hungry and I need to eat, but my children are starving, or my fellow prisoners are even hungrier than I. But I don't care. I choose for self, and I eat. Or maybe we have that plate of desserts out there, and we know we really need to lose weight so we can be healthier, so we'll live longer, so we can serve our families and our friends better. But we look at that chocolate pudding, we're just overwhelmed. Although we know we shouldn't, we do, don't we? This weakened state where we are subordinated to either our selfishness or to being overwhelmed by the biological and psychological inputs are what in theological terms we would call the stain of original sin, or more succinctly, original sin. Perhaps a bad choice of words, because we tend in our society to think of sins as something that we do, whereas original sin is not something we do, it's something we are. It describes this weakened state where we do occasionally have these glimpses of absolute love and good. But most of the time, we are either choosing to act upon these biological inputs for self, either overtly or subtly when we look at our good and how our good is sometimes selfish, or because we're just frankly overwhelmed by these biological inputs for food or for drink or for sex or for power or for control or anything else. So this is original sin. It is our souls in slavery to ourself and to our inputs, to act upon them for self rather than love. And that distinction between love and self is absolutely essential, because indeed there are only two ends in all of life. When we trace back the threads of what we do, our actions, voluntary or involuntary, when we unwind this thread of reasoning or action, we will come to either of 2 points. Either we did something for self, or we did something for love. The two are opposites. What is the opposite of love? We usually think hate. No, hate is just a manifestation of the opposite of love. The opposite of love is self. They are diametrically opposed, and they are the only two ends in life. Everything we do, we either do for love or we do for self. And if we're honest with ourselves, we'll probably find we're being generous that 90% of the time what we do really comes back to self. And when we understand this difference between what love really is and self, Now we come to understand the difference between business as usual and the new business plan. It's the difference between love, which is truly selfless love, the kind of absolute love that God has had within Himself for all eternity, that is eternally sustainable, and the selfish love that we usually experience as humans. Well, we've been floating around in the clouds with all this idea and these concepts and a bit of philosophy. Let's bring it down to earth. Let's illustrate the difference. Sometimes in Christian circles, I hear this kind of a conversation. I hear someone say, well, why did God make us? Well, He made us so that we could build character. Why? So that He can give us eternal life. Why? So that He can share His life with us. Why? And we keep asking why. And why do we keep asking why? Because we're trying to figure out what is the bottom line for God. What is God getting out of this? And the answer is, there is no bottom line for God. Maybe He does receive something out of it, but that's not why He's doing it. God does it because He is love, not to get anything. Even more practically, I like illustrating the difference between the absolute selfless love of God and our typical selfish love this way. Picture a romantic dinner with your dearly beloved wife. And the setting is splendid. It couldn't be any more perfect. You're sitting across from this private, cozy table, and the stars reflecting in the wine and the moon in her eyes, and you're just so deeply in love. The music's in the background, the violins are playing, your heart is pounding, and you look into your wife's eyes, and you say, I love you. And she looks back, and she says, why? What would we say? Well, we might say, because you're such a wonderful person. Because you're such a good mother to our children. You're such a wonderful wife. You are kind, and you're gentle, and you're patient, and you're wise. And I just feel so special when I'm with you. You make me feel complete. Life just glows when I'm in your presence. And we can look at that and we can say, well, is it love? Yes, it is. And is it good? Yes. And is it selfish? Absolutely. Why do we love you? Why do I love you? Because of all I receive from you. Because you make me feel so good. Because you make me so happy. Because you're such an admirable person. For all that you are to me, I love you. Now, picture the same romantic setting with Jesus Christ, our husband, who calls Himself a husband to the church. And we sit across the table, and Jesus looks deeply into our eyes, and He says, I love you. And in a fit of madness, we look back and say, why? What would He say? Would He say, because of all the things you are? Sinners, ones for whom I had to die, the ones who literally beat me to death, hung me on a cross to die? No. He wouldn't say because of all the things you are. He would say because of what I am. Because I am love. And that's why God's love is eternally sustainable. It does not depend on the reinforcement He receives. Jesus tells us that the Father loves the sinner and the righteous alike. He makes His rain to fall on the good and the righteous and the unrighteous, the just and the unjust.